morning. Welcome to the Thurston County Board of County Commissioners Board Work Session for this Wednesday, May 17th, 2023. It is 9:34. My name is Ty Menzer, Vice Chair of the Board. Commissioner Mejia is excused this morning and Commissioner Edwards is present through Zoom. For public virtual attendance, you may follow along on the Thurston County YouTube channel. This session is scheduled for half an hour to address the Grand Mound SubArea Plan, an informational briefing to the board. We have community planning and economic development staff, County Manager Mira Chavez and Assistant County Manager Robin Campbell. And let's jump right into it.
Yeah, this commissioner is an update on the Grand Mound SubArea Plan. As you will hear probably today, is a little more specific related to the potential changes on the UGA boundaries. That is really what the potential next steps will be. You will hear that nothing for you to decide at this point. It's just to bring you up to speed. And there's different steps that we need to take. We, in coordination with the TRPC, in fact, and eventually we'll go to the state, the Boundary Review Board. That's the Boundary Review Board, the urban growth, whatever board that is.
I think Urban Growth Management Subcommittee.
There you go. Thank you. Josh?
Great. Thank you, County Manager. Yes, as the County Manager stated, another item in our comp plan updates, excuse me. This is what I would frame as another legacy item. This plan has not been updated since 1996. And so again, in terms of working to clean house and move items that have been on the docket for a long time to the Board of County Commissioners through the Planning Commission and to have community input, this is another output of that great work. We started a lot of this work before the pandemic. The pandemic made it difficult to do that community outreach, but the staff has done an excellent job making sure that folks within the community are heard and that the folks that are on the edges that would like to have the site-specific rezones done have also been heard. We recognize that there may be some frustration as we work through this topic because of timing, because of how long this is set, because of the data that we don't currently have that's in process in terms of the industrial land study, housing information, other items. So our goal at this moment is to start the conversation and then work to unwind the many different pieces that are part of this topic. So know that staff's intent is to get this before the Board of County Commissioners so you can start having some of the same hard conversations that the Planning Commission had, because there are so many moving pieces to this and so many folks that are interested in this going forward. I would also say this is one of those places where the Board of County Commissioners, the Grand Mound SubArea, this is not an incorporated city. So there's a lot of opportunity here for the Board of County Commissioners to consider a vision for this area and how you think this works into many of the different goals of the comprehensive plan when it comes to workforce development, commercial activity, housing, all of these things. So this is, from my perspective, a really cool opportunity to have this conversation that hasn't been had for a long time. And so knowing that there's lots of pieces to it and this is going to be complicated, our continued goal as staff is to facilitate this conversation for the community. So with that preamble of recognizing that this is going to be complicated, more complicated than the previous one, I believe, I will pass it over to Kate. Now that I've made it really complicated, you get to take it over.
No, that was a great intro. I might repeat some of that, but thank you.
You get this one and wireless cards? What did you do wrong?
I like the complicated ones. Yeah, I'm good at it. Okay, I'm sharing my screen. Good morning, Commissioners. I'm Caitlin Nelson, Associate Planner with Community Planning. The purpose of today's briefing is to provide an overview of docket item CPA 7A, the Grand Mound SubArea Plan, including the Planning Commission recommendation and the next steps. And like what was previously mentioned, this briefing is for information only, and I'm not asking for any decisions today. The update includes an update to the Grand Mound SubArea Plan itself, which was last completed in 1996. The plan has updated land use data, population and employment forecasts, revisions to goals and policies, and a significant update to the transportation chapter to include information from the TRPC Grand Mound Transportation Study. The update also includes changes to Thurston County Code, The Grand Mound design guidelines were previously located in the back of the Grand Mound sub-area plan. So those standards were codified in the zoning chapter of the county code with this update. And there were also changes made to reduce the types and widths of minimum lot widths in the R3 to 6 per 1 acre and R4 to 16 per 1 acre zoning districts.
Okay, just one sec. Commissioner Edwards, can you hear okay, the presentation?
Yes, sir. I can. It's good.
Microphone's right
Okay.
Okay.
The change to this code was requested by Development Services staff based on public input. The update also includes 8 land use and rezoning amendment requests that were reviewed with the sub-area plan. 5 of those site-specific requests were solely rezones, and 3 of the requests were rezones that would also require an expansion of the Grand Mound urban growth area. In your materials, you should have received a map of Grand Mound with each rezone request identified, a map of each individual site-specific rezone request, and a staff memo with background information on each site. The Planning Commission reviewed each site for consistency with the comprehensive plan, the Grand Mound sub-area plan, the countywide planning policies, the requested zoning districts, and public input, and then provided individual recommendations. Staff has held several preliminary open houses in the past with both the Grand Mound and Rochester communities, but conducted another open house in November of 2023 in Grand Mound. The Planning Commission met for 6 work sessions and held a public hearing in November of 2023, and then provided a completed recommendation in February of 2023. The Planning Commission has recommended approval of the Grand Mound sub-area plan, the Thurston County code amendments, and 4 of the 5 site-specific rezone requests. The Planning Commission recommended no change to one of the rezone requests that is not requesting an expansion to the urban growth area, but is located outside of the urban growth area. And then Planning Commission recommended no change to each of the rezone requests that include an expansion of the urban growth area. The Planning Commission also reviewed an alternative proposal for the Blacklight Quarry property that would not require an expansion to the UGA, but would require a rezone with proposed amendments to the Rural Resource Industrial Zoning District. And the Planning Commission held to their decision of no change due to the potential impact of the proposed allowed uses. The Planning Commission also considered recommending that amendments to the UGA be reviewed after the industrial land study, docket item CPA 8, is completed, but Planning Commission held to their original decision of no change for those properties. To summarize it, the industrial land study, docket item CPA 8, would look at available land in the county, how much industrial land we have, whether or not there is a need. The Planning Commission considered that that project was going on and deliberated whether or not these rezone requests should be considered after that study is completed. And they decided not to push that decision off. If applicants would like to reapply after that study is completed, they may also do that as well.
Okay, thank you.
Sure. In addition to the Planning Commission recommendations, applications to expand the urban growth area must be reviewed by the Urban Growth Management Subcommittee as identified in the countywide planning policies, which is coordinated through TRPC and will have a representative from each jurisdiction in the county. They will provide a recommendation prior to the next board briefing on this topic. And the next board briefing will be scheduled in July or August, most likely, to follow up on these items, and then a public hearing will be scheduled before taking any final action.
So the UGM will essentially get this presentation and then dive into each one of the applications as well?
Yes, but only the 3 properties that are requesting an expansion to the urban growth area.
Got it.
That's it?
Yes.
Commissioner Edwards?
Can you stop sharing?
You know, I don't know as I really have questions at this point in time. I'm looking forward to this moving forward, though.
Us too.
So I guess my paper's flying off. So I'm a little confused about like the process of this bundle when it comes to the land use, requests. Because ultimately, the Board of County Commissioners may or may not agree with the Planning Commission's recommendations, and as in any issue. And this one especially, because there's like 8 projects, plus all the other, details and code changes that you mentioned. So if the board, so by the Planning Commission, I guess, yeah, I'm processing here because I knew there were ones that they excluded, but I thought, I guess before this morning, I thought they were excluded to wait for more information, industrial land study, more data that TRPC, and what you're telling me is that's not actually the case. The Planning Commission is ready to be done with those 4 and not have them be approved. And they're ready to make a final recommendation in that regard. So that changes a little bit the landscape that I was expecting.
Let's pull that apart a little bit. I don't think that the Planning Commission has made their recommendation, and that's what you have in front of you. There is no next recommendation for the Planning Commission. So they're not saying, they're just saying what you've been presented.
They're ready to go.
So what your assumption that you came in with remains.
Okay, and what would happen, I guess what happens now with the 4 that the Planning Commission says, we're okay with these versus the 4 that not? I mean, isn't there more to be done, environmental study or?
That's a good question. So Kate, look at page 8. Fire district, I think it's fire district number 14, tribal lands trust, tribal trust lands. Is that what you're referring to, Commissioner Mincer? Those 4?
Yeah, I guess, let me just, maybe I'm being oblique. I want the board to have the ability to make the decision that ultimately we get to make. And I don't know all the steps of this process. And I don't want there to be, I don't want at this point process to stop so that ultimately we're not in a position to make the decisions on all the projects. Because we may or may not agree with the Planning Commission. So I guess I'm wondering, like, does something need to happen? Do we need to give some kind of direction so that all the projects, the background work is getting done so that ultimately the board can say yes or no? Because I'm interested. I mean, I didn't do all the work the Planning Commission did, but at the high level that I've reviewed the projects, I'm interested in frankly all of them. And certainly at least a couple that I know more about that have been recommended for no change. So I just want to make sure that we don't get our hands tied by something that's not happening right now. I mean, Planning Commission recommendation, great, we'll consider it once we have to make the decision, but I want to make sure that we're not off-ramping these 4 projects to where if the board wanted to proceed with them and not agree with the Planning Commission, well, now it's 6 months delayed because X, Y, and Z didn't happen. Is that making sense? Like, for example,
Yeah,
you're
yes.
saying that the Urban Growth Management Subcommittee has to convene in order to get, say, Wilmofsky approved. Well, if Planning Commission recommendation is kind of carrying the day as of today, there'd be no convening of the UGM subcommittee because there are no projects approved by the Planning Commission that require UGA expansion. Well, I don't want that to happen. If I want to see the UGM convene and consider those projects so the board, so I as a commissioner have the opportunity to say, if I want to approve that project.
And I
Is
believe
that making sense?
That is making sense. Thank you for that clarification. First off, I think let's clarify and confirm the board's hands are not tied in any way by the Planning Commission's recommendation. Is that correct?
Correct.
So you still have full flexibility as the Board of County Commissioners on the decisions in front of you. Second, I think help us understand a little bit better the UGM process. So those 3 that would trigger a potential expansion of the UGA, they immediately directly go to UGM? Or does the board need to take action?
No, we've scheduled that meeting to happen regardless. So even though Planning Commission recommended no change, the Urban Growth Management Subcommittee will be meeting to provide a separate recommendation. They may also recommend no change. They may recommend that they think you should approve them. But
So
those
even
will be
if the
reviewed
board,
together.
so like turning this back the other way, even if all commissioners said, you know what, Planning Commission, we want to go with them. we're still gonna have, and I say we, because I've been appointed to be on the
Yeah.
UGM subcommittee. We're still gonna have meetings about projects we have no interest in.
That's a good question.
Well, the intention would be that today would be information only, and then we would schedule a follow-up briefing for your direction after the Urban Growth Management Subcommittee meets.
But that was his question, is does the Urban Growth Management Committee have to meet? If the Board of County Commissioners say, so taking the opposite concept of allowing those three to have more conversation, what if the board said, nope, no more of those three, we don't want to talk about it anymore, UGM doesn't have to meet? Could it just stop right there?
I believe that since it is outlined in the countywide planning policies that they do have to meet on this.
Okay,
Because there's a formal request.
To get
Chair.
more information.
And I think that is to the benefit of the applicant
Mhm.
for the subcommittee to be heard. And that is the process they need to go through. So I think it's more to the benefit of the applicants to be heard about their proposal. But I do have a question related to perhaps on the discussion the planning commission had. The way I understand is, the four proposals they didn't support because the planning commission wanted to wait until the industrial land study is done. And then they can resubmit a new application. I'm just a little bit of a disconnect on that because I understand perhaps the approach the planning commission has taken to go ahead and expedite the approval of the Ground Mound and SubArea plan. Because expanding the UGA is going to take more time. I understand, perhaps that's the genesis behind that. But for the applicant's point of view, it's going to be the same type of delay. And even for the county, it's going to be the same type of delay. We wait for the industrial land study to be done. And then the applicants will have to resubmit again for those. And then we have to go update this plan again to incorporate those areas. And so we ended up on the same spot as opposed to for the board to consider to include those four projects and just go through the UGA changes at this point. Is that?
So I think, let me try this, Kate. I think that we have the planning commission chair here. So since there was a discussion about that, maybe you would like to be.
I have a lot more questions.
Okay.
So if we have time. Yes,
So I think
but-
that, I hear what you're saying, County Manager. I think what we're missing is the data from the industrial land study. So the outcome, once we have that information, will be different than if we started it now without that information. And I think that was part of the discussion that was had at the planning commission was, let's wait for CPA 8, the industrial land study, because then we'll have the data points that potentially support expanding the UGA. If we start that process now and don't have those data points, then we might not have support for expansion of the UGA. And so that would be,
So I think for that, but also involve the applicants, for instance, I think it's the
totally.
Black Lake quarry. I think they backed out of their initial proposal and they requested a change in zoning. That was not approved. What I just don't,
that was the split one. One piece of it was inside the UGA and the other part wasn't. And they shifted to the second one that was just do the land zone change inside the UGA, correct?
Right.
So explain that a little bit.
Sure, okay, so, and I may, if the chair would like to clarify anything, I would encourage you to. But on its own, each of these properties was reviewed as is, what information can support it. And the Planning Commission chose to recommend no change based on the information that we have. The industrial land study was provided as a topic of conversation of, do you want to push this back to wait for that study to make that decision? And the answer was essentially no, let's make the decision now that this does not have enough to support it. They did also review the comment that was provided by Black Lake Quarry that was an alternative that did not require an expansion to the urban growth area. It did amend the zone to make further allowances for what they were requesting. So it would increase the type of uses that were allowed and where they were allowed for that zone. The Planning Commission received it as a public comment and were given the opportunity to discuss it further, and they chose not to. So that's where that conversation ended.
But back to Commissioner Mintzer's question, just because the planning commission chose that path, it doesn't mean that the board has to. They can have more
But-
conversation on it.
But what needs to happen
So choose.
before, because I had some emails and chatter about the the ones that go forward are doing SEPA and the ones that weren't not. And I saw that as like, is that, I don't know these process well enough, but is that something that's gonna delay the board's ability to make decisions when it comes time for the board to make decisions?
So let me clarify the question. So considering the rezone of the parcel within the UGA, if you talk about that, are you concerned that it will slow down the full process for Grand Mound? Is that the question?
I just want, I want honestly, I'm interested, maybe I have a different philosophy than the planning commission. You know, to me, it's like we can't approve economic development projects within our UGAs without consultation with the cities. We can't approve economic development projects in the rural area because of very strict requirements of the Growth Management Act. The Grand Mound sub-area is one area where we have the control over, and we've really planned a vision for economic development projects where we can do stuff. So it's a place where I'm more interested in doing things that I might not do somewhere else because either of my own values or the law. So I'm interested in all the projects that I've seen at Grand Mound. And I don't want anything to happen right now that slows this down so that I or any of the commissioners have the ability to make the decisions on the quickest timeline that the law permits. So if somebody is not getting a SEPA evaluation because of the planning commission recommendation, I disagree with that. If somebody's, you know, I want this all to go, at this point, I'm not in agreement with the planning commission recommendation, I guess. I want to see all the projects be developed so that when they're ready for approval, I have the information to approve them or not approve them. And I'll learn more probably of the same stuff planning commission, and some of them may not be appropriate, because I know there are reasons why you don't expand UGA, period. Robin?
So I guess I'm gonna ask a basic question that I hope is related. Are there any steps between now and the time the board says yes or no to each of these things that would be different for the items tagged as yes than the items tagged as no? And what
my
are
question.
the things that are different? It is your question, yes.
Okay, so let's see if I can summarize this well. It is not so much related to whether or not it is a yes or no, it is the impact of each of those requests. So some of the site rezone requests that are recommended approval are, say, one example is the fire station. It's developed already, they're requesting a rezone to commercial. It won't change the site essentially. The SEPA will be very minimal. For the urban growth area expansions, if you are interested in pursuing any of those or the rezone of the Blacklight Quarry property, it could require an environmental impact statement. That process, since it is going through the SubArea plan update, would most likely, I believe, would require a budget amendment. I don't know the process for that at the moment, but it could take a few months to complete that process, yes.
I think let's pull back a little bit to answer the question. And this, I think, goes back to the county manager's earlier statement that you wait now or wait later, why not just get going? Is essentially what I understood the question to be, not to paraphrase. And where you just went into an area was the cost of staffing and resources, and I appreciate that. But let's think more about the process. So let's think, put them all in, as Robin shared this page. What's the harm in just moving forward and having all of these things discussed? And as we said at the beginning, that's up to the board's prerogative. The goal, from my perspective of the planning commission and the staff, was to get to this point, to have that conversation with the board. So if that's something you'd like to consider to move forward immediately, so SEPA is an umbrella. And what Kate is saying is depending upon the impact, it triggers different processes within SEPA. It could be a DNS, a determination of non-significance. It could be an MDNS, or it could be an EIS, an environmental impact statement. And so the ones at the top of that list, Kate's saying, will sail through likely because they don't have a greater impact. And those would be a determination of non-significance. But the others will likely be an EIS, which may be a longer process, maybe take more staff time, which is, I think, where the budget conversation came from. and then also may even not pass because we don't have the data to support what an EIS would find. But that doesn't mean that you can't ask for it, and that's within your purview.
So if I may, even if all of these said yes, they wouldn't necessarily all go through the same next steps to the point when it gets to the board. They're each a little different depending on what they are. But what I'm hearing you say is you want all the necessary steps to get to you in the event that the board wants to say yes.
Absolutely.
And that's
So
fine,
the-
yeah.
I don't know, maybe I need Commissioner Edwards' concurrence on that.
And, thank you, and I think it's probably what are the next steps, because I believe what you're hearing from the board perhaps is consider all the projects. And, aside from the budget amendment, that's a decision the board needs to make in terms of resources, time, and everything else. But I believe we as staff need to provide all the appropriate information for the board, what it will take to include all the projects, and what will be the next steps for the board to give direction, if that is the decision of the board, to include all the projects.
Commissioner Edwards,
Commissioner,
I'd like to ask-
yes, sir.
I'd like to ask
Yeah,
you, and you can-
I think, I'm a little confused on this deal. I'm with you on, yeah, let's get that. So if it takes you and I banding together and saying, yeah, staff, put that together, advising the county manager, great. I want to see that happen so we have some options. That's what I'm looking for. I just want to point something out that's kind of been a concern for a period of time, and that is that several years ago, the Tesla Corporation, Elon Musk, he wanted to do something down in the Grand Mound, R&D or something, and we were supposed to keep that under our hat and keep it quiet, I suppose, because of the potential of driving up prices of land. But I think one of the reasons, and I can't say for sure, but if I was in the Tesla management and I heard this discussion today of us chasing our tail and what it would take to get things done, to get things moving, I want to create some jobs and protect the environment at the same time. So I want to have all these options available to us. And I don't know that that's why we lost the Tesla R&D plant proposal. I guess it went somewhere else. But we were in the top 2, is the way it was explained to me by Michael Cade over at the EDC at one point in time. And I just can't imagine a business trying to get something done and watching this process. And so, yes, I'm frustrated, and I'm kind of with Commissioner Mentzer here on let's get some of this stuff moving and give us an option. Is that kind of where you're at, Commissioner Mentzer, is looking for options to move forward?
Yep, that's it.
So I think we have a concurrence.
Yeah, as staff, as we said at the beginning, we're here to introduce the topic. We are open to accept the direction of the Board of County Commissioners. I would reference the topic, Commissioner Edwards, just for the record. Your community planning and economic development staff did an amazing job with that request from Michael Cade at the EDC to find and locate the property that was requested from that company. And that's why we got to the number 2 position in the country.
Yeah, it was other elements that weren't successful, but.
Just for the
So
record.
next steps is, if you can probably outline the next steps related to incorporate all the comments in terms of time and resources. And then that will probably be the next briefing with the board.
Heard, acknowledged. Thank you.
Got what you need?
More. We weren't asking for
Yeah.
direction.
There you go.
There you go.
All right, thank you, guys. We're adjourned at 10:03 a.m.